Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Doc and the Poet Show. My name is Devin Porter, otherwise known as The Poet, and as always, I'm here with my partner in crime, Dr. Brooke Taylor. Brooke, it's wonderful to be back with you today. How are you doing today?
I'm great. It's good to be with you, Devin, and it's good to be with our tribe. I'm excited for today's fireside chat.
For those of you who are new to the channel, we are a relatively new channel, obviously called Doc and the Poet. And typically what our main focus is the toxic divide. And we spend a lot more time talking about solutions than we do pointing out, the problem of the toxic divide, because we don't even need to define that for you all. You know exactly what we're talking about, and we don't even need to point it out because it's everywhere. And so what Doc and the Poet are really about is a centrist philosophy where we approach these issues with just love, some practicality and a centrist kind of way of looking at things. And so today, Brooke, this came from an idea that you had from talking to, a friend of yours about the art of conversation. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So tell us a little bit kind of what spawned this idea.
No, we brainstormed, I think, and just chit-chatting, but it really is, what is a conversation? I think, so many times it's limited today to a text count or an email or conversation post-pandemic, these Zoom calls, but there's something to be said, I think, about that's irreplaceable about sitting down and connecting with your friends, your family, your loved ones, and just literally having this eye for eye exchange and to say, how are you? And I just want, that's kind of where it came from. How often do we stop and just have, we say that Doc and the Poet, we're here for, join us the fireside chat, a thoughtful conversation, the message of hope. We want this to be a dialogue. It's not a monologue. I mean, you're a fly on the wall of our conversations, but it is, it's kind of a litmus test. I mean, with every time you point a finger out, there are three always pointing back at you. So it's, what is the art of the conversation, and is it a dying art?
Right. And unfortunately, I believe that it is. And it's funny, I remember when I first heard that, I remember going like, oh yeah, that's true. You do have three pointing back at you. And it makes me think real quick about a funny movie. There was a movie called Total Recall, that science fiction surprise. I'm a big fan of sci-fi, and it was starring the excellent actor Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
I mean, our generation's Shakespeare or whatever. And there's a scene in the movie where the bad guy is going, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm doing all these bad things, and there's nothing you can do about it. And Arnold goes, F you. And the bad guy goes, I see that you are a brilliant conversationalist. I always remember that line. It just cracked me up. So it is a dying art, and it's dying for a lot of different reasons. And of course, you can blame technology and social media, and those are not blameless. But more pursuant to what we typically talk about is this national toxic divide that we're facing, that it seems to be getting progressively worse. Is that you started to notice it pretty early on, and then 2016 it got really much bigger, and then 2019 you saw it go up again, and now we're at the point where you're in the grocery store trying to buy bread, and you feel like the guy next to you is going to start doing this. So this toxic divide is getting pretty hard to ignore, and it's everywhere. And so we felt like the conversation piece was important for us to bring up. And absolutely, it is a dying art. And I think one of the reasons it is this toxic divide, and then I think a lot of you have heard the phrase, right? We're not talking to each other, we're talking at each other. And the other thing that you hear sometimes is that when you're talking to somebody, are you really listening to what they're saying? Are you processing it? Or are you just sort of waiting until they're done talking so that you can say what you want to say? And I think, Brooke, your conversation with your friend, where Brooke's friend said, it's neat to see the fact that you all are having this really listening conversation, if that makes sense. And when we first came up with the idea for the show, we wanted to invite you in to our fireside chat.
Yes.
We wanted you to feel like you were sitting right here with us, and we wanted you to feel like you were part of this conversation, So I think that's important. But Brooke, when you think of a good conversation, what do you think? You think listening? What do you say?
No, that's what in listening, I was listening thinking, is the conversation actually, should it be defined as the art of listening? And in the sense of, are you actively or kind of passively engaged? I think, that gets into the styles of communication. When you have a conversation, can you literally understand a message and the intent of that message, and how much, for example, like body language, tone of voice, these kind of interpersonal things direct the content and context of that message. And then we look at today's conversation that's so a lot of which happens on, in the virtual realm of media, social media, and you're limited to Twitter count, like a limited word feed and a tone of voice that's not there, so you perceive what you're hearing through your kind of personal narrative of a tone of voice, versus if you sit down, we could preach a message through print or in a tweet, but by, we think, 10 minutes, you can see our tones of voice, our eye contact, that we are genuine, that we do care, and that's what's replicated around the table, whether it's the boardroom table, the dinner table, a working group table, and so it's invaluable.
Well, Brooke, your comment about Twitter, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is a limited number of characters, and it creates, and think what you will about Twitter, and that's an actually interesting topic for us in the future, because there's a lot of this toxic divide that is actually happening, right with this Twitter thing. But the limited number of characters creates a shallow conversation. There's a limited thing, and just like what the other thing that you said is that if you're not able to expound on your views and you've got a very limited way of expressing them, then it's easier for people to misinterpret it, and it's easier for people to say, what you're saying, I'm going to convert that into something that I want to hear in either a negative or a positive way. So it's a very interesting thing, and I picked up a few things over the years, because in my job, one of the hats that I wear is I'm a sales guy. And you have to be okay at talking to people, obviously, to be a salesman. And I've learned some things from my uncle, actually. My uncle asks a lot of questions when he's talking to people, and Brooke and I will do this to each other, and I'd be like, oh, well, what do you think about the, and et cetera, and ask these open-ended questions that allow the other person to really expound on what they think. And the other thing that I picked up from him is that he does a lot of active listening, which, you'll see that Brooke and I do too. And, Brooke and I will be talking about something, and I'll be like, same.
Yeah.
Just the one word that is sort of saying, look, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I have a similar experience, but I'm not hijacking what you're saying. I'm just interjecting. That's active listening to me, is saying, that's cool. Keep going. So what other sort of things can you think about, Brooke?
I think about in a conversation, if you're communicating to someone, no matter what the context of the conversation is, the validation to be heard and to be seen. And that doesn't mean to agree. I think it's just to honestly to take the time, and if someone has something to say, you show the floor of respect, and you maybe put a device aside, and you can just say, I can see, maybe it's not the situation where it is the same. I can see that this means something to you. I can see that this is important to you. I see who you are as a person. I value that perspective. But then at the same time, if there is a disagreement, to say, no, I will share what I have to say. And to have a reciprocal tone of respect, that is the conversation. It's a back and forth exchange.
I'm trying to think about the best way to phrase it, but I support your right to believe what you believe, and I respect your belief. And now I just want to tell you that I believe something different.
And I should be afforded the same respect from you in return.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, and for those of you who know me, you know that I typically wear glasses, and I don't wear them during the videos because it reflects. But if you really want to look cool, just be like, tell me more.
That's such a poet.
Right? Or just like, wow.
Yeah.
Right? You could do something like that, but. I think that was one of the things that we wanted. We've got about 2 minutes left, but that was one of the things that I think Brooke and I really wanted to get across, is that acknowledge the person's right to believe what they believe, and everybody has different life experiences that bring us to have these core beliefs, right?
And ask questions in a conversation. If it is something you cannot relate to, or you don't know what it means, or you do feel challenged, instead of, I think, putting a wall up and stopping the flow of information of listening, just ask a question, and then perhaps through that discovery you learn more about each other, you learn more about a worldview that you maybe will not adapt or conform to, where perhaps you strengthen yours in the process, but it only happens through the art of the conversation.
Well, and if your worldview is solid, and it's based on your life experience and everything else, then you should be proud of the strength of your worldview, and you ought to be able to entertain other ones without necessarily having it change yours. But this is a topic we talk about a lot, is that we believe that we should try to enhance our ability to take a topic that's outside of our worldview and really look at it and examine it and decide whether this is an appropriate thing to add to our knowledge and our beliefs or not. But that's wisdom, I think.
Yes, in a conversation, it should be a safe place for the exchange of ideas. When it gets to the point of implementation, you know, how ideas meet reality, that's a different narrative in and of itself. But I think in the safe context of Doc and the Poet, to sit down, to think, and to talk. I'm happy to do this with you, Devin, each week. I'm happy to be a part of this tribe, and just please continue to spread the word about Doc and the Poet.
Right. And, you know, Brooke, thank you for always joining me on these you know,
Absolutely.
immense conversations. And, you know, there's another thing that people need to understand about this toxic divide is that Brooke could not do this without me, and I could not do
Yes.
this without Brooke, you know. And so, as a country, and you've got people who believe this, and you've got people who believe that,
Yes.
and that may be, but we still need each other.
Right.
And I think Brooke and I are good examples of that we absolutely each need the other because our skills are different, you know.
Yes.
So, you know, having said all of that, we hope that you all are going to get something positive and a hopeful message that you
Yes.
can take away from this. And as always, it just means the world to us that you all are joining us and commenting, liking, and subscribing. And Brooke, you want to sign us off for today?
Thank you for being with us, Devin. Thank you for taking the time to do this with me, and we will see you next Saturday for Doc and the Poet.
Thanks so much.